Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Creative Alabama podcast. I'm Josh Hamilton. Today I'm talking to Bradford Thomason, who is one half of the duo that makes up Window Pictures. They've made several feature-length documentaries over the years, most of which have played at Birmingham, Alabama's Sidewalk Film Festival and at other prestigious film festivals across the country. Their most recent movie, Jasper Mall, screened at Slamdance in February of 2020, just before the COVID-19 pandemic locked everything down. Bradford was a co-director on Jasper Mall and has edited all of their films. In this episode, I chat with Brad about their film work, his music, and how he and his creative partner transitioned from working as Deejays to becoming full-time documentary filmmakers. Thanks for tuning in. Here's my conversation with Bradford Thomason. Hey, Brad.
Hey, Josh.
I've always called you Brad, but do you prefer Bradford?
I could go either way, but Bradford's fine, Brad's fine, whatever you want to do.
I'm going to call you Brad, but for those of you who don't know, I'm speaking with Bradford Thomason today. Thanks for joining me on the Creative Alabama podcast.
Sure, thanks for having me.
What have you been doing during pandemic times?
You know, we do sort of our film work, which in the early pandemic, it was kind of promoting a film we had finished, Jasper Mall, and then the commercial work that I do on the side was a little slower, but that's picked up again a little bit. And then, also just kind of trying to keep flexing creative muscles, I guess, and doing some music and stuff like that. It's been cool. I mean, there have been days definitely where it was like, I haven't done anything today, especially early in the pandemic, but those seem to be gone. And now I'm kind of wishing they were back sometimes.
What is your main occupation, Bradford?
I'm a filmmaker, and I have primarily worked in documentaries, so 5 feature documentaries, all made with a creative partner, Brett Wickham. We've worked in various capacities on those. He directed most of them, and I co-directed Jasper Mall. Also edit for money. I edit commercial work, but I also edit our films. Filmmaker. I mean, sort of getting closer to the idea that you can do your creative work and make a living doing that. And I feel like I'm close, but we'll see.
Excellent. So let's get this out of the way. You are not a native Alabamian.
No, I'm not. So am I disqualified? Is this where I get like a dunking sound? And then I get kicked off and somebody else gets brought on in my place?
No, not at all. I've had other non-native Alabamians on already. So tell me the story of how you got to Alabama.
So Sidewalk Film Festival premiered our first film, The Rocket Fire Explosion, in 2008, which was really great because there's an Alabama connection with that film. We came down to Phoenix City and met up with Chris Thrash, who had a rocket fire explosion. And that was really the first time I'd ever been to Alabama. And that was really cool. And then, Rachel and Kyle at Sidewalk just really loved the rocket fire explosion and sort of championed the film. So we came down for that, and it was amazing because we hadn't really screened anything in front of a crowd, and it was our first sort of watching our work in a theater, and then we met all kinds of other filmmakers, and so from that moment on, it was like every film we make, we're going to submit to Sidewalk, and we're going to hope we get in because Sidewalk is great. Fast forward to 2012, and we have another film, Glow, and that one also plays at Sidewalk. And that year, I meet Allie Clark, who is a mutual friend of ours, and you've known her longer than me. And we just started talking, and I was still in Houston, and we started kind of seeing each other remotely, long distance, and then eventually I just made my way here. And there's a pretty strong freelance community here, a pretty strong video editing, video work community, and I was able to kind of get into that because she was in it. So it was really helpful that she was already involved, because Allie does the same thing that I do, video work, more in the motion graphics and animation realm, but we both work in the same field, essentially. And then Brett, my creative partner and co-director, I told him, you got to move here too, because there's work, and then we can continue to do our work. And we were both DJs back in Houston, and he was still DJing actually when I asked him to come here, and so it just worked out. And so he's here, and we're both working from Alabama now.
Excellent. And how long have you been here now?
I think I moved here in 2013. So what is that? It's 8 years almost.
Yeah.
Gosh, it doesn't feel like that long, but yeah, 8 years, give or take.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How do you make the transition from being a DJ to pursuing documentary work? Tell us a little bit about how you first got started filmmaking.
I was an English major in college. I always liked writing. After college, I did a little stint in graduate program for counseling and therapy, and that didn't pan out for me for various reasons. I mean, there were parts of it I liked and the parts of it I didn't, but I wanted to go a different direction. So I started to focus a little more on writing kind of as a hobby and, writing short stories and things like that. And Brett and I met through DJing, and Brett was like, I'm really interested in cameras and, making movies, even though neither one of us had really done that at all. So while we were DJing, we just decided to start trying to make movies. And I was like, well, this is a good way to channel both my love for creative writing and the interest I had in counseling and therapy into one art form, because documentary in particular, sitting down in front of people and doing interviews is sort of like a type of therapy, I think, especially when you're unearthing some things that people haven't thought of in a long time. And we chose documentary because it's I think it's a medium you can work in without spending a ton of money, and yet you can still maintain I think you can still grab an audience and hold an audience and make something really, really great without spending a ton of money on cameras. And back then especially, it was like we could take a standard definition digital camera and go shoot something like the Rock-afire Explosion, and if the characters were interesting and the people were dynamic and took you on an emotional journey, then the film holds up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Hands on a Hard Body or something. It's like you have a film that technically people would probably be like, oh, there's an, I don't even want to use the word amateurish, but there's a quality to this that isn't, the level we've come to expect from documentary or whatever, and yet you're completely glued to it from start to finish. So we knew that was an option with documentary, so that's why we chose that path. And then it just really stuck because we really enjoyed going out to Alabama and out to Orlando and like connecting with these human beings and then building their story based on our love of what they had done and just, the things that were revealed to us in the process.
If you haven't seen or heard of Rock-afire Explosion, maybe you could sort of explain that first film that you guys made.
Yeah, it's the Rock-afire Explosion was an animatronic rock band that played in Showbiz Pizza place when we were kids. So I think it's Chuck E. Cheese now is what people mostly know, but when we were kids, it was Showbiz Pizza. And there was Chuck E. Cheese too, but mostly Showbiz Pizza, particularly where we were from. And inside of the Showbiz Pizza, there was this life-size animatronic rock band, larger than life when you're a kid, that would play songs while you ate your pizza. And the images of those, I think, always stuck with us into adulthood. But then we found that there were people who were way more interested and obsessed with those characters in that time than we were. One person, Chris Thrash, happened to be in Phoenix City, Alabama, and he had raised enough money to go buy himself an entire Rock-afire Explosion set and put it in a shed out in his yard and then program it to play modern songs, put those on YouTube, and that's how we found him. So we're like, oh, we got to go talk to this guy because this is really neat. But more than that, he connected us with the guy he bought it from, who's Aaron Fechter, who was in Orlando, who basically invented the entire thing and built it from the ground up and had seen it all the way through its heyday to where it was when we caught up with him, which was like preserved in a warehouse in Orlando that we were fortunate enough to get to tour and sort of tell both of their stories. That's what the film is. It's Chris's story and it's Aaron's story, and then a few people who were like super fans. But it's our first film. We have a very special. It holds a special place in our hearts. It's also made entirely on instinct, so there are things we probably do different, but it's still a fun thing. It's on YouTube for free, so Rock-afire Explosion documentary, and you can find it for now, at least, until someone wants to put it on a Blu-ray or something, and then we yank it down.
I was just kind of imagining what it would be like to walk into those rooms with those functioning bands and seeing them work for the first time in person, and and that these guys have essentially programmed themselves, correct? Like,
Yeah.
what was that feeling like, just knowing how far they had gone?
It was really, I mean, it was really cool. When we got to Chris's, it was like, wow. And his Rocket Fire Explosion set was in pristine, like beautiful, straight out of the, crates condition. And, he had it in a little shed in the middle of nowhere. I mean, the most unsuspecting place you could ever imagine. You'd never think that behind those doors of that shed, there'd be this relic from my childhood, perfectly preserved. And, and he and a couple other guys, they had sort of figured out how to program these pneumatic, they're all pneumatic, they're run on, air pressure. He had figured out how to program these pneumatic characters with some kind of modern software run on a modern PC, and programmed them to play. I think it was "Love in This Club" by Usher, and "Pop Lock and Drop It." It was a lot of I guess mid 2000s hip hop, and then "Hey There Delilah" and stuff like that, like just popular songs. But then when we got to Aaron's, he had a pristine Rocket Fire Explosion, also in a much different environment. So his was in a big showroom area in his warehouse, also pristine, also beautiful. But he's still programmed with an Apple IIe, which is what they were originally programmed on. So it was really neat to see that difference. But I think in both cases, I mean, you see those things even, it's like when you go, I remember even when I got in college age, I went into my old junior high or something to pick up my sister, and everything felt so small, and the lockers feel small and the hallways feel small. But I don't know that the Rocket Fire Explosion had that feeling. Like when I saw it again in person as an adult, it didn't feel small. It felt as big as it did when I was a kid, and I think that's pretty rare. That's a testament to how incredible the characters are, and how incredible the artwork. All the people that worked with Aaron to make the Rocket Fire Explosion did such an amazing job at crafting these big robots, basically, that it was amazing. Yeah, it was a cool time.
Cool. So you guys decided you were going to make films, and you started a documentary because you thought it was, a path that you could execute, I guess, just the two of you. How has that evolved over the years? How have you upped your production value and sort of grown since that first film?
Well, we shoot in HD now.
That's a start.
Yeah. No, Rocket Fire was an SD. But in some ways it's different because there's, we know, we've been through the business of it enough to kind of know how to protect ourselves and do business things correctly, who are we getting involved with, and who's helping us with production or funding, and how are we finding funding? And these are all questions we didn't ask that first time around because we were just so eager to make a movie, which I think was the perfect path. I mean, we didn't concern ourselves with any of the things that we have to now because we just had to go make a movie. And I really appreciate that time. But so I think that in a lot of ways, there's a lot more preparation and, paperwork. There's a lot more things involved when we set out to make a feature that weren't involved back then. But in some ways it's also the same because, with our last film with Jasper Mall, I mean, it was me and Brett going to the mall, just a couple times a week, and just being there filming, very, very light. I mean, less people actually in that production process day to day than Rocket Fire. I mean, with Rocket Fire, we had, a PA there with us, and we had, people helping us, and with Jasper Mall it was even leaner. But I think where we've grown, I feel like we always had a little bit of an instinct for how to talk to people and how to get, people comfortable enough to give us honesty and truth, and go dig into their own memories and give us the stories that make for good film. But I think we've gotten even better at that. And so, that's one place where we've grown. So with Jasper Mall, we forged a lot of relationships, just being in the mall, just being present, never passing judgment on anyone or coming across as anything other than interested in what was happening there and who was there, and, hearing real stories from people. And so in that way, I think we've gotten better. Also, we've played bigger festivals and things like that, things that signify a growth in a filmmaking career. So
tell me a little bit about Jasper Mall. How did you guys decide? I am from Jasper, you know this.
yeah.
And so I grew up going to that mall. And when you first mentioned maybe making a film about the Jasper Mall, I was like, oh, okay. I wonder what that will be like. Because, when I was a kid growing up, that was the place. It was full. They had the Kmart, they had J.C. Penney. There was not an empty storefront in the entire building. There was a music store. I bought my first guitar at the Jasper Mall. So tell me a little bit about how you found Jasper Mall and decided that would be the one, and what was sort of the decision-making process to even make a movie about a mall.
Well, I think it would be perfectly acceptable if you said, when you told me you were going to make a film about my childhood mall, I had no idea what you were talking about. Like that would make sense to me because, in a way it was what we had going into it was, I think a nostalgia for malls, and the fact that they're going away, and we knew that they were slowly going away. And then there were a lot of practical things, I think, that made Jasper Mall the right mall. I was driving back from Nashville or something, and I don't know if I had like seen some photos of the Jasper Mall online. I'm kind of forgetting what led me there, but I just stopped in to have a look at it. This would have been a year before we started shooting, and walked around, took some video and photos on my phone because the mall hadn't been updated, since it was open. Like and it's pretty well preserved mall. It's like it hasn't been updated since the early 80s, but it also doesn't look like decrepit or crumbling or anything. It looks, they keep up with the plants and all the tile work and the benches and things are intact. Although I did hear that there used to be a fountain in there. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there used to be a fountain. So apparently the fountain was lost to the years, but otherwise the mall was in pretty good shape, although dying. Several empty stores. The anchor stores were already gone when I was going to visit. So, all of them except for one. So J.C. Penney, Belk, and Kmart were the anchors, as you know. Mm-hmm. Kmart and J.C. Penney were already gone, even that first time I went to visit. And, it was the facade of J.C. Penney, actually, that was part of what I loved so much. It was just like, wow, this looks so cool. Like, look at this woodwork. And, just all the things I loved about malls as a kid were in this mall, and it was close by. It's 45 minutes or 40 minutes from where we live. It's small, so it's a very manageable size with a manageable amount of people. And, that day I just started texting Brett photos and videos. I was like, look at this mall, like, should we come here and do a film about the people in this mall? And it's like, what does that even look like? What do we do? How much time will we actually have to spend to generate stories, and to kind of to create characters who are who people want to watch. And when we came back together a year later, give or take, or a while later, we met Mike, the caretaker, the guy who's kind of at the center of the story, and he was just so dynamic and interesting. And there are so many questions we had immediately about him and for him that we were like, well, an audience would have those same questions and be interested in him. So that was kind of what made us think, okay, there's got to be some other characters here. We met Robin, who owned the florist, and we learned that she was thinking about leaving the mall, and all these things started to come together. And then it was like, I think we can pull together a story here, and obviously a very sort of free-flowing, sort of abstract one, but we started to feel like there was enough there to go after. So we just started filming, and we filmed for 8 months or so, 8 or 9 months, just kind of on and off, capturing things that happened in the mall to make the movie.
Yeah, it was fun and also a little sad to watch, just because
I hear that. Yeah,
I remember what it was like when there was an arcade right outside of the JCPenney. It was called Take 5. And
nice.
I used to go in there on the weekend, and they had the machine, the gambling, but essentially it's a gambling machine where you put the tokens in and it pushes tokens off a ledge. And there was a big orange token that if you were able to get that token off, you won like the big prize, which was like this waterproof watch. And I think I spent like $20 one Saturday trying to win this orange token in that arcade, and I won it. And then, the watch obviously is like probably like a $10 watch, but yeah. Anyway, it's cool to see a place that I spent so much time in through another person's eyes, I think.
Yeah, and I think that I think that's why the film works for people, is that even people who didn't go to Jasper Mall, they have their own mall that they went to. And that mall, the things in Jasper Mall are universal enough that that people have the same feeling you do, I think, but reflecting on their own mall that they grew up going to. So, I mean, that was the case with us. I mean, not being from Alabama, my mall was in Houston, and it was similar to Jasper Mall. It was a little bit smaller. So, all the things that we were looking for or just finding, I think resonated with us because we'd had our own mall experiences, and I like to think that the film can resonate with people who didn't have mall experiences. I mean, just because it's a portrait of something that's going away or, a snapshot of a moment in time. But yeah, that's cool. I'm glad that was a unique dynamic we were able to have there with that movie. Absolutely.
Well, that kind of feeds into my next question, which is you and Brett tend to really mine nostalgia. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what is it that feeds that that sort of desire to explore your childhoods or things from the era of your childhoods in your films?
I don't know. No, I mean, I'm sure there's some bigger answer, like, of being brought up in a particular time, with the way we received our media with things like MTV and, Nickelodeon and, posters of Michael Jordan or Akeem Olajuwon or, people who were important to me growing up. The way we received and were lucky enough to be able to consume this media. I'm sure there's some answer there about that time and how it was a kind of a new thing. I think there's a melancholy to Jasper Mall. There's a melancholy to Rockafire and Glow, also, and County Fair. There's a little bit of a sadness in all of the films, but we don't. I think we like to have fun with movies too. Like, I think that we like our movies to end with hope, and we like to entertain, and we like our docs to be entertaining. So I think that we mine these things from our childhood that we're nostalgic for because, we loved those things and we were passionate about them, and, they were just a lot of fun, and we want to kind of revisit who the people who were behind those things. With Glow, which was the story of the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, women's wrestling, when we started to make that movie, wasn't like, the minute we tell people it's about a women's wrestling troupe, in the 80s, who were on TV, they'd be like, women's wrestling, that's, what are you going to do with that? And it's like, well, we're going to go talk to the people who did it. And then, mm-hmm. And so it was really interesting to learn these all these stories and, get these stories and turn them into something that ends up being relatable to people, even who maybe didn't like women's wrestling to begin with. So that's part of it for us too, like finding things that maybe don't on the surface look like they would warrant or have enough to make a film around, and then realizing that there are interesting and passionate people around every corner. You just have to look for them,
Yeah, I think most of your films tend to kind of focus on that nostalgia thing a bit, but also there's some sort of reflection of like pop culture or something having to do with pop culture, except for County Fair, Texas. Like that seems to be kind of the outlier in your film work. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you guys decided to make that movie and why it's a little bit different than your other work?
Well, Brett grew up in Alvin, Texas, where 4-H and FFA are really a big deal. I grew up in the suburbs too, and I went to Pearland High School, which is also where 4-H and FFA are a big deal there as well. But neither one of us ever participated. But it was always one of those things where, I mean, there was more of a curiosity there, because what we knew about it was that we used to see kids walking to the ag barn, in their jackets, and presumably going there to care for animals, and what that world looked like, and the details of that world were definitely more alien to us as we approached the project. But at the same time, we knew that these were teenagers, and so this is where you go and find a coming of age story, through a unique window, which is 4-H, FFA, raising farm animals. It's still connected to our high school years, or to our younger years, because it was high school kids. But yeah, it was a little more of a learning experience for us, I think, as we went, and rewarding though. I mean, I really enjoyed. I know we both really, Brett and I really loved that film and enjoyed making it and getting close to the kids in it, and it was a good time.
I think I've told you that's my favorite of your films.
Well,
I think you guys handled. For it to be something you didn't necessarily have any experience with personally, you handled it with such delicate care. Yeah, I really connected with those kids, even though I also never did 4-H or worked with animals or anything. So yeah, it was a very touching story, I thought.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that's what I was saying earlier about reaching a level, and whatever the tools are that you gather doing this to get close to people and gain their trust and things like that. This is something that Brett is really, really, really good at, and he spent a lot of time, more time than me. I mean, I worked on the film, obviously, and edited the film, but he spent a lot of time with those families. And, I think that's just a big part of building the connection on screen is building the connection personally while he's there with them, while I was there too.
That's great. So I've complimented you a lot. Let's talk about some of your mistakes. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the sort of the mistakes, not necessarily business-wise? I think you've kind of touched on that a little bit, but like just technical mistakes and little snafus. You got any good stories about just total a shooting day just kind of falling apart and that you can laugh about now?
Well, with the first 4 movies, we were traveling outside of where we lived. So with Rockafire, we were traveling. So it's like, you don't really have the luxury of having a bad day. Like, you have to make it work because you don't have any money, and you are leaving the next day. Mm-hmm. With Jasper Mall, we had days predictably where we went and nothing happened, like the whole day, and so we sat in the food court all day and or all evening and just left with nothing. But then we'd have other days where it was just like magic happened twice in one day and stuff. It was really interesting like that. It's hard. You try to. Brett and I joke a lot about documentary. Like as soon as the cameras stop, that's when all the good stuff happens. And that happened to us. It feels like that happened a lot on County Fair, Texas, because we were trying to be around as much as we possibly could, and yet still, we're at the county fair, and the minute that we turn the cameras off, and we're sitting down, just relaxing a little bit, someone comes running around the corner and says, "Oh my gosh, a cow just had a baby over there," and people were crowded around it, and it was giving birth, and it was such a beautiful, crazy thing that just happened. Wow, it was crazy. And it's like, and our cameras are just sitting next to us, and it's like, cool, great. I'm glad that happened as soon as we stopped recording. And it's fine. I mean, if you didn't film it, then it didn't happen, I guess. But, and then the other thing is just kind of learning to work with people. You tell people we're filming with you, and so let us know if anything cool is happening. And sometimes they don't, because understandably so, because people are just living their lives and you're not the most important thing in their lives. But, those would be examples. I mean, we did a lot of the lessons we've learned have been, business related and related more to the industry, I think, and of course, I think we've gotten better at making things look really good. I mean, Brett Jasper Mall is just I love the way the film looks, and that's him, just being really great shooting, and it's just gotten better and better with every film. Just growth, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how Jasper Mall has fared since it's been released. Did you guys get into any big festivals? How's the reception been out in the world?
Well, it premiered at Slam Dance in Park City on late January 2020. So I mean, we just snuck in there before everything fell apart. And we were fortunate enough to have really good screenings at Slam Dance. Great festival, great experience, and the film was picked up by a U.S. distributor, Gravitas Ventures, who released the film, sort of in a segmented way. They start with Amazon, rentals and iTunes, and then now it's on Amazon Prime. I think the reception's been really, really great. I mean, it seems like most of the people who watch the movie connect with the movie and like it. I mean, of course, there are people who don't, but it's more that they just don't. That the movie sometimes it just isn't the kind of movie that that people want to watch. I don't know, but the people who do connect with it really connect with it. I mean, there have been some really touching and deep, things written about the film. We've had a lot of great people, conduct interviews with us and write reviews with us for us about the film that just really got it, and we really appreciate that. And I think it's doing well on Amazon Prime. I'll find out more, as we move forward, but it seems like a lot of people are watching it. So
that's great. Have you always been a creative person, or when did you start creating things?
I grew up around music. My mom was a singer and performer. And that side of the family, my mom's side of the family is very creative, full of singers. So I was around her performing, which meant that, things were in the house that were creative tools. Like there was an acoustic guitar always laying around, even though she didn't play. And there was a keyboard always laying around, even though she didn't play. She sang, but, these are just things that come about when you're working in that world. I remember being a kid and going to the recording studio, and, my dad worked at a stereo store. So there was always, we always had interesting stereo equipment, and there was always music in the house. And, so I think that made it sort of unavoidable that, like I was destined to really love music, and then to at least entertain the idea of making it. And then I think when I was 14 or so, I begged my dad and mom for a drum set, and because I had already made a drum set out of buckets and things, and I think that might have proven to them and my grandmother that I was, if I did that for a year banging on buckets, then maybe they should give me a drum set, because I might actually play it. And they did, and I did. I played it like crazy. I mean, I played my drum set all the time. Started playing in bands, just bands with friends in high school at 15. And I played music in some sort of band or in some form or fashion from, when I was 15 until, I was probably 30. I mean, just playing in different bands with different people. And then when we started making films, I did music for the films as well. So it was really music that got me interested in creating, I think. And I love to make music. So.
And you're currently making music under the moniker Awnings, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of you asked in the beginning about COVID times. I mean, I'd always I've had a lot of little pieces of things that I've just recorded for fun, but I collect a lot of, like vintage synthesizers and things like that. And so when we got kind of locked down at home and I wasn't working very much because the freelance work had slowed down, I was like, okay, I'm going to take some of these pieces and take some new things and just actually make a collection of music. Really, for the first time, I mean, I've played in bands, and those bands have had albums, quote unquote. And I've played with other artists who've released records, but I've never actually had the discipline, or I've been doing too many other things to actually like record a collection of music and say, okay, this isn't a record, and I think the folks at Earth Libraries, Bryant and Bree, having them as kind of, as friends, and then also knowing their capacity to actually release something really helped me like say, okay, I'm going to do this, because if it's good enough, then we can release it, and then it can be out there, and I can, just have this thing in the world. And it was really fun. I mean, I really enjoyed it. And I'm probably not the best self-promoter where my music is concerned. I'm probably not, because it's kind of a hobby, and I kind of don't mind it being that way, because video and film and editing is all the things. It's my creative work in our films. It's also what I do for a living. Mm-hmm. So kind of making music a little more of this fun thing that I don't have to think too hard about. I think I like it that way at this point. So, maybe I'll release something else in the future, or maybe not, but probably not going to be doing a lot of social media posting is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Right. It's great to have a creative outlet that you don't have to promote all the time.
Sure. Although they probably want me to promote it a little bit more. But, yeah.
So where could someone find that if they wanted to check it out?
It's on Spotify. It's on all the streaming places, and it's on YouTube. It's just the Awnings EP. But if Awnings is a word, obviously, that's going to get you a lot of window coverings. So you could just search for Awnings and then Earth Libraries, and I think that'll take you to the Bandcamp and other places where you can find the record. Yeah. Cool.
Well, what kind of advice would you have for anyone who was looking to get started in documentary work or just filmmaking in general? What's your little tidbit of knowledge that you might want to drop on someone?
It almost sounds cliche, but I think that I would still suggest that they do what we did, and that's just like make a movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many resources that even weren't there in 2008. Both. As to, I think Brett bought a book on the, 3-point interview lighting, like in 2008, whereas now, hundreds and hundreds of videos showing you how to light things correctly and showing you how to light things really well. And, cameras are more accessible, and, you can shoot beautiful footage with really affordable cameras. And, so find yourself something interesting that interests you, do a little prep work and then go make something, I think, is the best way. It's probably not going to be great, but there'll be a lot that comes from it that helps you moving forward, I think. And I do, and I've always worked with someone else. I've always had Brett as a creative partner, and I think that's important. I do. I think you can do things on your own, but you can't do everything on your own, and you can't do everything great. I don't know. It gets really hard to like just do everything and do everything well. And I think there are probably people who can do it, but it's not me. So having someone to obviously share, the work with, and, but also just have more than one opinion or perspective, and sometimes those opinions and perspectives are diverging, and sometimes they meet right in the middle. It's just so useful, I think, to have someone else in your creative world who you're working with, and that could be more than one person. It could be a group, it could be whatever, but I think that's what I would say. Do those things. Great. That's a great answer. Yeah. You're so lucky to have Brett and have a creative partner. It's hard to find that. It's a special relationship. Yeah. It just happened, and then and just stuck. And I guess I also, I don't want to give the impression that people obviously can't create amazing things by themselves. Although I do think that even if the film you're making is your movie and not your movie with someone else, like the work that I do with Brett is, you at least need to have other people who you're showing it to or talking to about it, or, and if it's possible for you to just, shoot it and produce it, but maybe not edit it. I think all that's useful. It's useful to have other eyes on your work, and other voices in what you're doing, and I think this comes into play when you're talking about the stories you're telling and, what's the perspective of your, of one of your subjects, and or do you have someone you're talking to about that, who maybe shares that perspective? I mean, all these things are important, I think, when you're making a film. And so I don't know, you can do it on your own, but you gotta have some folks to bounce things off of and keep a dialogue going with.
Absolutely. A support system, people you trust.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who will tell you the truth.
Right. And that's another thing, but it's true. Yeah. You gotta have, but I always try to be as truthful as possible with people who ask me questions, because otherwise what's the point? And I know you do too. So
absolutely. Well, Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll be seeing you around.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. Later. And that's the show. Jasper Mall is currently streaming on Amazon Prime. You can also rent County Fair, Texas while you're there if you'd like to check out my favorite film by Bradford and Brett. You can also find Bradford's music under the name Awnings at earthlibraries.com. Thank you for listening to Creative Alabama. Subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Creative Alabama and creativealabama.com. Hope you spend the rest of the week creating something of your own.